Good evening, everyone. Special Wednesday night edition. Finally, talking comics again after what seems like forever. Tonight, we have an extra special guest. We have the mayor of 1920s New York with his Norlem series and how would you say, the creator.
It's an indescribable, unpitchable book. So whatever, it's so many genres that it's basically become my eternal challenge is trying to talk about this book in under a minute. Indescribable.
So let's see if I get it right. If I remember correctly, it is Eudaimonia.
Yeah.
Oh, we got it. So Eudaimonia, let's hear that 1 minute pitch on the meaning, and then we'll get into the book.
Well, by the way, welcome or thank you for having me back. I gotta say, you've upgraded your setup game. It's very impressive. I don't remember your webcam looking this clear last time we talked. So it looks like you've improved your setup a bit. So I just want to say congrats for that.
Thanks. Yeah, I figured out if you get an HDMI cable, it works much better.
I'll get on that someday. But yeah, Eudaimonia is it's a concept from ancient Greece philosophy. It translates to the good life, and it basically means that in life which is worth overcoming the trials that we all inevitably face. And the book is set during World War I, which to my estimation is probably one of the hardest times in human history for people to find meaning in the throes of such, kind of surreal carnage that was World War I.
Yeah, that's, to me, that's a real interesting perspective. We see a lot from like Europeans, like, I'm suddenly blanking on the Irish guy who wrote the poem, like something in the fields of Flanders, poppies in the field of Flanders, or
Owen.
Famous. Yeah. But it really did a number on the Europeans and even the Americans.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine it now, but the U.S. was pretty dead set against war.
Yeah.
For the next couple of decades after World War I. So what, being that it's such a hard period to describe, did that attract you to it more? Or were you like, I'm just going to give myself an extra hard challenge?
So at the time that I started writing the series, I was still in college. And so I was studying, I was doing comic studies, first of all. So for those of you who haven't been to college yet, you can actually study comic books in college. It's pretty neat. So I was studying comics, and then a lot of the literature I was reading was from World War I. So I specifically was taking a course on the poetry of World War I, specifically the poems that were written by the soldiers. So like you had mentioned Owen or Siegfried Sassoon, Sorley, and like kind of reading about how they were conveying what they were going through into literature. That the thing that I wanted to create at the time was, and I was also studying philosophy, so these things all kind of came together to form Eudaimonia.
It's an interesting thing that you asked, or that you mentioned, which was studying comics in college. How did your professors react when I guess you told somebody that's what you wanted to study?
If I'm being honest, my senior year, this was all during my senior year, and I didn't know about this program, but one of the preeminent comic study scholars happened to be at that university and had done a lot of archival work with comics. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I was kind of filling out like my senior schedule, and the one class was open, and it was just kind of snowballed from there. But they were really open to kind of like, I probably could have been weirder. You know what I mean? Like, Yeah, there were people in that class for their final project. They're doing all kinds of like really weird, abstract things that I think what I did may have been the most normal.
That's interesting. Some years ago, I had a guy on, I don't know if you know him, Andrew DeMann, who is the guy who does the Claremont run on Twitter.
Okay.
And the Claremont run was his PhD thesis. And in talking with him, he was saying he got absolutely no support from the faculty for his doctorate until he was doing. He framed it in the context of like sexuality and queer theory and stuff like that, and then they were like, "Oh yes,
Yeah.
And I remember some years ago I was working at UCLA, and there was a woman who was doing her PhD thesis, and she told me like, "Oh yeah, but I have to do it on like a subset of European comics because they wouldn't let me do American comics." And I remember from back when I was in college, back in the 90s, more on the art side, if you wanted to draw a comic book like stuff, like the professors all thought you were the scum of the earth.
I mean, what you described sounds about right. I think like dyed in the wool comic book fans, if I were to describe what is considered the canon or what we studied, they would probably pull their hair out, because it basically existed of early comics history, the 60s, and then instead of any of the really good stuff in the 80s, jumping ahead to like really ultra modern stuff that like that did not sell at all. Like we were reading like Jennifer Jones and
Riri Williams and
no, actually the professor, because this was kind of near Portland, so the professor brought in like basically all the people he knew in comics that sold utterly failed runs and made us buy their books. So we're reading like David Walker, Black Panther. We're reading like Rucka, Wonder Woman. It's awful. Yeah.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Interesting that they would go there, but that's bad.
Well, they're friends of the professor, so you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Portland,
so
what are you gonna do?
Claremont X-Men, I don't think we didn't even touch it. I read it for the first time in the last year because it had gone over my head as well. Yep.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'm kind of curious. What do you think?
I enjoy it. I don't enjoy the art as much as like the 50s, 60s stuff, which is like really out there. And I think I'm just an old head. Like I like the older, the better to me. It's just more to my sensibility.
That's kind of my feelings on Superman. Give me 1938 Superman.
Yeah.
But mentioning the Claremont run, I'm just a little curious. Did you read the whole thing, all of his run?
No, we're basically over on the gutter. We're reviewing it with Kayla, who's a massive Claremont fan.
Oh, nice.
But we've done, I think, like 5 issues so far. So it'll probably something we'll do over the course of a decade. So talk to me in the year 2035.
Yeah, I'm curious. The 70s and 80s the early 80s were kind of an interesting period, but I'm curious as to your opinion later on once you get to like Barry Windsor Smith and Mark Silvestri.
See, the thing is that like I was reading a lot of comics as a kid, but we were broke. So my comics experience was whatever was at the library. So it's basically all over the place. Like I didn't read runs. Like I would just read like whatever random Punisher X Wolverine issue was at the library that week.
Yeah, it's a shame back in the day around here, like there were no comics in libraries like that. They just considered it, beneath them. But that would have been such a great thing. And today, I've been to the library and they have manga.
Yeah.
But and they, not to say they don't have any American stuff, but it's all like collections of stuff that nobody cares about for the last 20 years. It's not, like, let's have the new issue of X-Men this month. Let's get the new issue of Captain America for whatever reason.
I think it's a reflection of, like, I did my first con a couple months ago, and the thing that I noticed was what little interest in comics there was. It was just for people digging through long boxes, right? There was like almost nobody there looking to like pick up a new comic. So it might be a reflection of that.
Yeah, out of curiosity, why do you think that is?
Oh, so on my first day at the con, now to be fair, this could have just been the worst con in the world. It's a convention in like rural Arkansas, but like I would say 80% of the people that walked by my table, when I went to do a lap around the convention, I saw them at their table. So like the turnout was predominantly for cosplay and meeting like C or D list celebrities. You know what I mean? And then like the guy with the Star Wars toy booth, he did great. So there just wasn't a lot of like, I don't know what to call it, hungry readers.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I kind of know what happened to some of it. I mean, there's old farts like me, who we like comics, but we grew up with comics that were ubiquitous at the grocery store, at the gas station, everywhere you go. Pretty much, there were comics. But somewhere in the 2000s, they were out. I think grocery stores were kind of the last place they were in. And they were gone. So, I understand the direct market model, but it's like I don't go to golf stores because I don't golf. People aren't going to go to comic book stores if they don't read comics.
Yeah,
unless
you're
it's
saying
like
that there needs to be some kind of bridge.
Yeah, well, comics existed for quite a long time without comic book stores, because they were easy. They were a disposable medium. Nobody expected you to collect them. Like you'd buy one, I'd buy one, Aldous would buy one, and then we'd all swap. It wasn't, you didn't get that collector mentality really until late 70s into the 80s. But then it was a good ecosystem because you would start with like Spider-Man, maybe a Superman or a Batman that you got at the gas station you went to on the way home from school to pick up some candy. And then when you got a little older, there would be like a guest star in the Batman comic. And they'd say like, hey, go check out so-and-so's, go check out the Cyborg comic or the Hawkman comic. And you'd be like, what? And then you find a comic book store and you could get anything you want. So that was like the when the drug dealer gives you that free packet of crack to get you hooked, like that's what that was. But when you cut that out, and the place where they could have done better, I think, is they really screwed up starting in 2008 when you had both Batman Beyond and Iron Man. Or sorry, not Batman Beyond, the Batman Begins and Iron Man. Because between Warner and Disney owning those studios, how hard would it be to talk a lot of these theaters into having a few spinner racks on the way out? Once you come out of the theater, if you took a kid to see Iron Man, they're going to want that. You have one edition. Like they used to do, like I remember Star Wars, Ghostbusters had a comic, and it was just the comic adaptation. You do the comic adaptation, and then you do like a thicker, either giant size or a proper like graphic novel of the original material that you have on the way out. And like, if you're a parent and the kid's like, Daddy, I want, I go, okay, sure. Good experience. Right. But they screwed it up. Right. So for me, that's kind of the problem is like kids like manga. And I haven't really seen a whole lot. I mean, of course, there have been some good comics and there have been indies that have been very good, but like nothing in a place where they're going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part. I don't read manga, but the question I always had is they're pretty beefy. right? So it
Yep.
isn't that kids don't want to read, you know. So does the market not say that the problem is with the product itself more than anything?
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of people have been saying. Like the stuff that they're doing is just not connecting with the kids. Number one, I have questions. Like I think people like that bigger format.
Yeah.
Um, and I have talked to some younger people who do read comics, and they have told me that they prefer older ones
Mm.
because it's a linear progression, right? So like, oh, if I get issue 168, it'll tell me if I missed something relevant back in 152, and I can go there and I can look for it. Whereas
Mm.
like now they continuously restart
Yeah.
the series every couple of years. So like, well, what is the definitive Batman?
Yeah.
Like, how many explanations for the Batcave have there been?
Mm.
What's real and what's not? So I think in a lot of ways it's the same thing if you do like a multiverse story.
Yeah.
It cheapens your overall line because
Mm.
it says nothing matters basically.
Yeah. I think I don't know if you'll find this to be a good parallel, but Mrs. She teaches film at a local college,
Hmm.
and um, I don't know if you've watched any movie trailers in the past like 10 years, but like
Sure.
they're awful. Like every
Yes.
movie trailer is the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like it's like anti-selling. Like it makes me hate whatever it is. And so she told me that she showed her students the trailer for the movie The Warriors,
Hmm.
and it blew their minds. They were like, "That is the best trailer I've ever seen in my life. Why don't they make trailers like that anymore?" Like so it's like we unlearned how to connect with young people. Like it's bizarre.
Yep. Yeah, and I do think part of the problem too was when you're in any industry, you run the risk of the new hotness. Like I think, Jim Lee was a great artist, but when all of those people were at Marvel, like they totally screwed up all the X lines,
Mhm.
and they, in a lot of ways, like Todd McFarlane did not do great things for the Spider-Man series. Even though there were top sellers, there were things that had a bad long-term effect. I think what happened is sort of a new hotness sort of problem. Whereas in the 2010s, they don't want any superstars
Mm.
after the Image people, but they would just start hiring new people just to have new people, and then they started hiring them on qualifications that weren't real qualifications. Like, oh, we need a woman writer for this, like Squirrel Girl, or we need a black guy to write Black Panther, or
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it's just the mediocrity when you had this whole stable of uh, old guys. You could have said like, hey, we need more diversity or whatever, but you needed those old guys to start like a talent training program.
Mm.
You need like a certain amount of Marvel or a certain amount of DC in what they're writing, even though you want them to write new things and different. Like there has to be that anchor point
Yeah.
to have continued continuity with the old stuff.
So I tend to think of things in parallels to one another.
Hmm.
And the thing that I always like to think about is the parallels between comics and baseball cards,
Hmm.
because it's kind of like the same story. Baseball cards went from something you get at the, 7-Eleven or the gas
Yep.
station. And then there were dedicated baseball card shops. Um, the baseball card world had what's called the junk wax era, which is like the 80s and 90s, where everybody ramped up production
Hmm.
and they basically flooded the market and made everything worthless.
Yes.
Comics had the collectible era, 80s and 90s, where kind of the same idea. Everybody is buying to try and speculate. The difference between the two is that the sports card market was able to adapt because there is always a replenishing youth of talent. There's always going to be rookies, there's always going to be stars. You're always going to have something to sell and kind of base your market on. Whereas, like you described, comics don't have that. People just walk away if what is there doesn't interest them.
Yeah, and to me, that's like a something that's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of ways in the '80s, Jim Shooter kind of was on the right track, where like Spider-Man wasn't he was out of his high school phase, he was out of his college phase, he got married,
Right.
and a lot of the people who grew up with him in the '60s or '70s, they were growing up in their lives, and this character was continuing on. And in my opinion, like the whole Miles Morales, Peter Parker thing. Peter Parker should have retired a long time ago. He should be an
Mm,
assistant professor. He should be the mentor for Miles that he never had,
right.
where he occasionally shows up for adventures, when he's really needed, but he's really more around to give advice. Whereas Miles, appealing to kids, um, he's now getting a little bit of the mentorship that some of the other superheroes wish he had, but it would be so much better had they done that. Same thing with the X-Men. All the X-Men that were there in the '80s, they should all basically be retired or professors at Xavier's Institute.
Yeah, I mean, to borrow a line from my co-host Aldous, he always talks about this, about the need for heroes to die.
Hmm. Yep.
And it's almost like the medium is stuck with, like, in perpetual Peter Pan syndrome, and is unable to mature and adapt because we're handcuffed to um this narrative, or what is
Hmm.
it, this archetype. It's like an unchanging, like it's like a radiator that we're chained to because it can never
Yep.
mature.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's in a lot of ways like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Like when was the last time? It was like 20 years ago was the last good Simpsons season or something like
Well,
that.
probably longer than that. I refuse to acknowledge anything past season 10.
Interesting. 11's my mark.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, it, it's a shame, and I do think that is where manga is appealing to kids
Hmm.
more. It's easy to get into. You get into book one of the series, and like it goes until whatever the end is, and maybe those characters will show up again, but it'll be a different series.
Yeah.
But like this series is this series, um, and that lack of growth and maturity, I think has really been what. Well, there's been quite a number of things, but it's been one of the biggest things that has hampered comics from their inception. Through, like, I'll give the late '30s a pass. We'll say after World War II, a lot of those characters that the vets liked and they were reading when they were deployed, um, they should have uh, grown up and gone on to other things, so people would have something to graduate into.
Right. Um, yeah, and I mean, if you want to see, even though it is technically the same character, but
Hmm.
the Doctor from Doctor Who, everybody
Mm.
has their Doctor, and the
Yep.
Doctor eventually moves on, and even though it's the same character, each iteration brings something unique about the character, and it's something that different fans from different eras can latch onto, or at least it did until Capaldi. Now it's dead to me.
That's for some reason, well, I shouldn't say some reason, I know exactly why. I could never get into Doctor Who.
Okay.
Um, I understand a lot of people love it. It's got a huge fan base, but for me, it was Doctor Who was on PBS
Hmm.
like 1 hour before Star Trek: The Next Generation,
Oh, sure.
and it's like you went from that was when it was the guy with the doctor with the long scarf.
Yeah, Tom Baker.
Okay, it was him with like Daleks that looked like they were, in like a middle school
Yeah.
play versus like the special effects of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which were incredible for the time. So my like 10-year-old brain could not get into the Doctor.
And it's weird. I have watched all of Doctor Who that you can watch, and the stuff from like the 60s and 70s is like, it's kind of my breaking, or no, wait, the 70s is pretty much my breaking point, because if you go back and you watch Doctor Who from like the really early years, the format is like, it's like torture. You know, it's like you'll watch like a 20-minute episode and nothing will happen at all. And it'll be part of a storyline that has like 10 episodes in it. And you're just pulling your hair out. But back then, the people that grew up with it, that was like the new hot thing. You know, we have television. Are you kidding me?
That's true. So, you know, as a writer yourself, how do we get back? Like right now, we're in a weird place, especially in North America, where kind of sort of movies, but like YouTube is really the big entertainment thing. But I personally believe there's still an audience for this kind of stuff. There's still a hunger, because storytelling will never go out of fashion. Storytelling with images, that's like doubly awesome, and it'll never go out. But how do we get back, to, you know, having, I don't know if you want to say all ages, but having stories that are resonating with more than just old farts?
I think, and first off, you're asking probably the least qualified person to talk about it, because all I make are things that connect to me and about 20 other people. But in my opinion, I think we get back by relearning the importance of interactive storytelling. And what I mean by interactive storytelling is storytelling in which the writer feels comfortable with not being hyper specific about everything they're trying to convey. That's the thing that to me has been kind of lost. It's just something I see in a lot of what I would classify as bad writing, is when a writer is so hyper focused on not being misunderstood that they state and restate the most obvious ideas over and over again, instead of what, in my opinion, is good writing is the opposite, which is saying things that can be interpreted in many different ways and being comfortable with your reader kind of playing around with the ideas in their mind. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to think of a good example here. My favorite example is, have you ever watched the show The Wire?
I haven't. I know what it is, but I never had HBO or Showtime or whatever it was.
Okay, you don't need to know anything at all about The Wire, but there's a scene where one character says to another character, he says this, he says, "You want it to be one way, but it's the other way." And you have no idea what that means, but thinking about what that means is better than knowing what that means. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, but getting back to, you know, the idea that you're only making comics for you and 20 other people, isn't that also kind of important though? I mean, at some point, like, okay, you know, a Superman story is great,
Right.
but there's only, you know, I think one of the problems is that all the big publishers are just so milquetoast,
Right.
and just so there's a sameness to everything that's made almost, from the bigger publishers. Like, don't we kind of need a little bit of weirdness and eccentricity at the edges to hopefully inspire somebody?
Yeah, I mean, that's what my aspirations are, to become a cult hit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to write Superman. You know, I don't think I ever even would if I could, you know, because I'm more interested in asking the question, like, do we still need superheroes? Like, do we really need this many? So yeah, I mean, I think that stuff is important, but I think only time will reveal if my books have that kind of resonance with people. You know, I hear, you know, the clamorings of a few people who've read what I do and they get it and they kind of get what I'm going for. I hear just as many people who read it and are like, I don't get it. And to me, that's kind of a small measure of success. Like I did a book fair, which by the way, that's the thing I've learned since we've last spoken is Comic-Cons might not be for me, but man, do I do really well at like a book fair or an art
Oh,
fair.
interesting.
But I had this woman come up my table and we were talking and she was like, this is all really, really cool, you know? And I said, well, here, why don't you take this book and I want you to read just one page, just pick any page and read half a page, but you'll know if this is for you. And she picked it up and she read it and she was like, this is really annoying. And I was like, oh, you mean the writing? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, not for you. And she's like, but my husband would love it. And her husband came back, bought a book, nice guy. But like
Nice.
that's my goal is I would rather make something that a small group of people are never going to forget and a small group of people are going to be like, this is weird and I don't get it. I've done my job.
Yeah, for me, in a good market, you would have both. Like,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with a mainstream hit and something that tries to play it a little bit safe, but it can't all be that. You need to have just totally out there, bizarre. Like you were talking about, like a lot of stuff from the 60s. Like there was a lot of drugs going on back then, clearly.
Right. Yeah.
And we were seeing it on the page for a number of different characters. And it made it kind of great that they were in the same universe as like the Fantastic Four, who were a little bit more stodgy,
Oh man, I don't know. Some of those old Fantastic Four, I'm trying to think.
Well,
there's like I don't remember any of the other. The only thing I remember from this entire Fantastic Four issue was there's a spaceship and there's a villain and he has a cup holder. And it's like the most weird looking cup holder you've ever seen. It's like the artist went in and was like, what would a cup holder look like in another dimension? And he did it. And it was probably because of drugs.
Nice. Yeah. Plus back when you had the Comics Code Authority, they'd be like, oh, cup holders, nothing wrong with that. Oh, so Dale asks, I always wanted to ask JP how he finds readers for his Eudaimonia comics. They are niche of a niche.
So the way I find them is I lure them in with jaw-dropping art, and then I trick them into reading poetry.
That's the way to do it. Yeah. So with your art, so I obviously have not read number 3, but I have read 1, and I think I read 2. And I recall the art being fantastic. So for anyone who is interested, let's see if we get a little sample here. Yeah. So, lots of great imagery, decent coloring. How do you go about, how would you say, making the selection, deciding what kind of art you want that's going to go well with your work?
So this book is a little different from 1 and 2. 1 and 2 was done by the same artist, and we had a bit of a falling out after the second book. So when I started this third book, we weren't even talking to each other. And I guess I could, to answer your question. So what this book is, it's basically a collection of all the short stories I've gotten published over the years, converted into comic form. And so from watching, being around the scene, seeing people like Rod Looper, who's working with Michael Bancroft, and Rich Ayala, Roach Balls, and Jason Sandberg, Jupiter, I kind of compiled these names into like a little Rolodex. And then I started pulling from these stories and thinking like, okay, who would be good? Like who would be a good match for this story? So, there's a story in here called Turns Out, which is about a guy who gets stuck in traffic at the end of the world. So it's very post-apocalyptic. I immediately thought of Rich. We teamed up. This one you're looking at here is Jose Garcia.
Okay.
It's a story. It's a very short story called World Play. And, him being an animator and doing a lot of animalistic things, it seemed like a pretty good fit. But yeah, I just kind of matched the story to the creator. And then while I was working on this, I reconnected with Emmy, the artist from book 1 and 2. He's done a couple stories in here, and we're working on a final one to kind of close out the series.
Oh, nice. So we'll close out the series, meaning close out book 3, or this will be the last book?
This will be the last book. So
okay.
Book 1 introduces the concept of eudaimonia. Book 2 shows that it's something that is kind of universal to all people. And then book 3 is kind of a demonstration of how it's universal to all places and times. And then once we get there, it's like there isn't really much more to say about eudaimonia. So,
okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's an interesting answer. Do you find that it's easier to get artists to work with you now that you've got several books under your belt, and you can kind of like?
I mean, you can always find an artist, but I think there's a level of trust when you've put out some books and you've put out books that people have highly regarded. So yeah, I think it does make it a little bit easier. The way I would phrase it is an artist would never say no to a deposit.
That's true, but they might not turn in the work.
Exactly.
That's the difference. What about with I'm kind of curious, you've had this Norlem, which is also a fantastic series for anyone who's interested in jazz and 1920s Harlem. Is it do you find that the audience, because you have several books now, like they sort of trust you more, or I mean, it seems to me that there's a lot of fear in people who want to back books that like, well, I don't know if I'm actually going to get the book, or maybe this is going to suck. Whereas like once you have a few out, people can take a look and see.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the part that's really important for creators is I think more than anything, it's that you stand by your promise in a timely manner, and it will always make things easier. So I've kind of adopted the route of having a book mostly finished when I go to launch. New Orleans comes out on July 21st. I'm going to do a campaign for it, and the book is already done. Like July 21st is when the publisher is actually putting it out. So,
okay.
What I'm going to be doing is encouraging people to order the book. If they just want the book that's coming out, order it from a retailer. Don't get it from me. You know what I mean? Because that helps me. The more you get it from a retailer. But I'll be doing a campaign for anybody who happens to want a signed copy. Or if they want a bundle of both books, they can get that too.
That makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. So you mentioned this is the last one in the series. You've got New Orleans. Do you have anything else in the mix, or you're just planning on going to New Orleans in the future?
New Orleans is going to continue. This will kind of be a last one for Eudaimonia. But I'm trying to think what else. Aldous and I are going to be working on a Western called The Rough and Tumble. It's going to be about aging gunslingers going to war with early Chicago mafia. Because it's about a decade where they both existed.
Yeah.
And then I have another series I want to start. It's going to be post-revolution Russia, and it's going to be called "Are You Staying Warm?" And it's a
Mm.
strange title, but one of my favorite writers in the early 1900s, he kind of got caught up in the communist, phase,
Hmm.
and he actually went to the Soviet Union and almost couldn't get back to the U.S. And he later recanted all of that and converted to Catholicism. But I remember the one thing that always stuck with me is that when he was in, you know, communist Russia, um, when somebody was walking, like, so if you're walking down the street and you see somebody that you know, and
Hmm.
you go to say hi to them, instead of saying "How are you," you would say, "Are you staying warm?"
Yeah.
And then I don't know, that phrase just always stuck with me. And so it would be about a guy who's kind of like he's basically kind of like he's hunting down the Bolsheviks. And so he
Hmm.
becomes this kind of like working class farmer's hero for exacting revenge on the Bolsheviks who took over.
Oh,
So it'd be
now
kind
that
of
sounds interesting.
like Russian V for Vendetta.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, okay. I am down for that one. That
Yeah,
definitely piques my
that's
interest.
definitely a running theme because the second New Orleans, a lot of that book is really just an excuse to punch communists.
Which is interesting since you lived in Portland for so long.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but for me, it's
You say interesting, I say it makes perfect sense.
well, I do kind of find it interesting because for whatever reason, we don't learn about communism anymore. I
Right.
mean, you had the propaganda in the 70s and 80s, but like my father and his family had to escape during the Hungarian Revolution in
Mhm.
'56 because they were going to murder them. And like I get along real well with like Cubans and
Mm,
Venezuelans and
sure.
people like that. But the average American doesn't
Nope.
really know anything about what happened. Just like we hated the Russians and like that was it.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder why that is.
Hmm. So it is nice to see that there will
Mhm.
be other points of view coming out. You probably won't get in any school libraries, but
I mean,
it
no,
should
but
be good.
I did sneak it past the publisher.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
the New Orleans series has a proper publisher.
okay. Did it always have one? I don't
Yeah.
remember on the first one. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can get it at Barnes& and Noble. I don't know how it happened, but, I Google myself sometimes, and, it's a if you look up New Orleans and the word Harvard, you can get
Hmm.
it through the Harvard bookstore.
Really?
Yeah, so I ordered it. I ordered myself a copy through the Harvard bookstore just so I could keep it unopened and say, "Got my book from Harvard."
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Oh, that would be interesting if you ever got that on into some of those comic classes.
Mm. Yeah,
Blow people's
I
mind.
don't think that would work. I don't think my professor would like that.
No, no.
He was
Definitely
one
not
he was
college
one of those
professors.
professors that, like, he's middle-aged and he wants to seem cool, so he just drops the F-bomb like 10 times every class.
Oh. Yeah. Was he a little friendly with the women in the classes?
I don't think so. I think everybody hated him, actually. That was the funniest part about going to university in the Pacific Northwest is you would have these very performative professors trying to sound like they are as progressive as possible. And
Ah.
but if you talk to the students like after class or before class, they all hated them anyway. You know what I mean? Like it didn't register.
Ah. Interesting. Uh Unfortunately, I've never been up to the Pacific Northwest, even though it is gorgeous looking.
Mm. It's fine. You can just do a Google image search for trees. You don't need to go up there.
Trees and Sasquatch. Um, yeah. So how has it been? Because I think the last time we talked, you had just moved. How has it been making the adjustment to
Oh yeah.
to Middle America, to the Midwest, which I have to imagine is, although not crazy different, it is
No, it's
quite
crazy
a bit
different.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was born in Philadelphia, but I grew up in like Amish country.
Oh, nice.
But like always going to Philadelphia, always going to Baltimore. I loved cities and I loved living in because we lived in Eugene, which isn't like a major city, but
Mhm.
it's a pretty big city. And then Spokane's a
Oh,
moderately
yeah.
sized city. But when we moved here to Arkansas, it was like quiet. You know what I mean? It was just like
Uh-huh.
I step out on my back porch and I'm just like I hear crickets and nobody's asking me for a cigarette, nobody's tweaking out on my porch. It's like so like I still love cities, but like that kind of quiet is kind of priceless. Because we just got back from like we just recently went to Seattle, and
Oh,
so it was
okay.
like kind of like stepping back into the insane asylum, and I was just like looking around the city and just like it made me appreciate quiet.
Yes. And it was so my wife and I moved out here from LA.
Mm.
We're also in the Midwest, although a different part. And she had lived in LA for most of her life, and she's like, "Wow, people out here are so nice, so friendly.
Mm.
It's weird."
Yeah, I remember I had a professor who told me about that. About I didn't get it. It's like you don't get it until you experience it, and then it's like,
I know, like, oh, I could have been living like this the whole time.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so in let's talk a little bit more about the show too, because I recalled the first time you were on, you were very hesitant and very nervous, but it seems like now you really enjoy the show that you do, at least the one with Aldous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I it's not that I'm not a comics guy, but like there are different levels. And
Yeah,
so, you know, people like you and Aldous are like that's a whole other level of comics guy. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So I think in the way that like I could tell you who played defensive tackle for the Eagles in the 80s. Like I have that
yeah,
kind of just like flash memory. When I hear other people talk about comics and they're able to just like say, "Oh, this was colored by so and so and the line work was by so and so." I'm like, "How do you do that?" You know what I mean? Like I don't
yeah.
know why I've never had that memory because I'm just not at that level yet. And so I'm in with the show with Aldous on the gutter. I'm in like this very slow drip comic book study that's been going on for years now, and I still don't feel like I'm anywhere, near where I need to be. But yeah, he's kind of dragging me, kicking and screaming through the annals of comics history, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame in a lot of ways that comics has never been treated well from an
Yeah.
academic sense. But even even like me, like I saw you were on John's Long Box the other night. He's a
Mm.
friend of mine, and I feel the same way when I talk to him. It's like if it's the books I know, I can hold my
Right.
own, but he knows like everything.
Yeah.
And then it goes back.
Like if
Unfortunately,
we
there
review a book and John's long box has never heard of it, it's like,
exactly. And then there's I don't know if you're familiar. There was an artist whose name was Butch Geis. He just died a
yeah.
few months ago.
Hmm.
Like if you follow his Twitter channel, and you go back, he's talking about guys who were doing art and writing back in the 30s,
Yeah.
and a lot of that stuff was amazing. But like, who remembers that? Who celebrates that anymore?
Yeah, I think we did a Butch Geist book maybe a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
but it's
Yeah,
gone. It's gone.
he had a lot of good stuff. The last thing I saw him do was I don't know if you remember Allegiance Art, which was by Mitch Breitweiser.
Mhm.
They a few years ago, he did a series, the Futurists, I think, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It's
Yeah,
just a shame what happened with Allegiance Art, but
I'm such an a-hole about writing though that I'm pretty sure the book we did of his, I
mhm.
think we tore it to shreds because I think it
Well,
was a book. If I'm I hope I'm not misremembering, but I think it was a book about a paranoid schizophrenic. Um,
hmm,
and that was it. That was the only idea in the book. It was like the
hmm.
delusions of a schizophrenic.
Well, I mean, writing has often been um, undervalued in comics. I mean,
Mm.
comics is a visual medium, and not to say that artists are more important, but artists are the one who's going to grab your attention. They're the ones who's going to get you to
Yeah,
go over to the shelf and pick up that book. But
yeah.
once they
Like
pick
there's a
up the
reason we don't watch silent films anymore.
yes, well, and even Americans don't like a lot of foreign stuff because they have to read
Mm.
subtitles. But once you get into that book, you really need a good story to keep them coming back. If it's not there, maybe they would buy one issue for the art, but they're not coming back. Um, and
Yeah, that's why my process for writing comics has kind of developed into um, there's like layers to the editing.
Mhm.
So if I'm writing a script, obviously I need to edit that script, and then an editor needs to edit that script.
Yeah.
But then once I have that back, there is another layer or two of editing. Um, and it usually involves getting out of the artist's way, right?
Yes.
So saying what needs to be said in the most efficient way possible so that it's a comic and it's not like, a jungle of word balloons.
Yes. We've all seen recent Marvel comics.
Yeah.
Uh, although Chris Claremont, he was famous for including a lot of stuff.
Yes. It's not that I think you can't have a lot of dialogue on the page. I just think that there is an art to the efficiency of
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. And I don't know if you ever watched your boy Zach when he was doing his
Yeah.
stuff, but he would always go on about the GI Joe silent issues because there was actually two.
Mhm.
Um, I highly recommend that for any writer who wants to write comics,
Mm.
because if you're, especially if you're on the production end, um, you can easily tell a story without any spoken words or
Mm.
any thought dialogues, and the story can come together and people can understand it just from the visuals. And to me, it's the writer who understands that, and they
Mm.
understand, like, everybody wants to get more of their own part on the page, but I think, like you're saying, staying out of the way when you can get that story information visually from the artist.
Yeah.
I think that's the sign of
Yeah.
a writer
Um,
who really knows his stuff.
yeah, like there's actually a story in Eudaimonia 3 that doesn't have any dialogue. Um,
Oh,
the
nice.
entire story is visual. So, and it takes place at a restaurant. So the only words in the story are the title, and the title is mise en place, which means everything in its place.
Hmm.
And the name of the restaurant is Le Point Culminant, which is French for the whole point. So,
Ah,
in other words, the only words in there are directing you to the fact to two ideas. Number one, everything is in its place, and that's the whole point. And so the visuals are telling the story. There is nothing beyond that than that.
hmm. Definitely
Which,
interesting
now
to
that I'm
see.
saying that out loud, sounds like the most like, I don't even know what to call it. Like, if what I tell people is, if I told me about this book, I would want to beat me up. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. To me, it's interesting. There's, sometimes you read books or comics or whatever because you want a little bit of escapism,
mhm,
a little bit to empathize with, and there's others you read because you want a little thinky.
yeah,
There's only so much thin gruel on Netflix and Amazon
yeah.
that you can take before you need a little sustenance.
And I would say that's probably the whole concept behind Eudaimonia, is that when I describe it, I think people hear the ideas in it and they think that I'm selling like a self-help book or a spiritual book or something like that. But like, the only point to this entire series is to ask you questions and give you something to think about. There's no
Mhm.
answers here. I'm only offering questions.
Um, yeah. So now you mentioned that Norlum is totally done, and this is almost done, or you're still waiting on one or two
Um,
more stories.
it's going to depend on how much of it or what the funding ends up as, because there are stories in here that can be unlocked.
Oh, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Down in the stretch goals.
Yep.
Okay, so we had for anyone watching, when you're looking at the prices, for whatever reason, Indiegogo decided to change itself to New Zealand dollars for some reason, even though I'm not in New Zealand. Um, so, for example, the issue is $15, not 25. There's a link in the chat and in the description on YouTube. Go check it out, and you can see the real price for itself. But the first, you have hit the first stretch goal.
Hmm. And that story's already done. It's a story. It's actually the first short story I ever got published. Um, and it's called, okay, so it's called The People Versus. And it's the story of three brothers at the sentencing hearing for their father's murderer. And they're kind of having this discussion about whether or not it's morally just to seek the death penalty. And the big twist is that one of the things I just said isn't true.
Hmm. Interesting.
But yeah, at the link in the description on the page, there's also a preview story. It's kind of like what I've been talking about, is if there's a chance that this isn't going to be for you. So if you just read the story on the page, you'll get a pretty good idea. If you read that story and it moves you, this could be something worth checking out. And if it doesn't, no harm, no foul.
Very cool. And so when do you expect, rough estimate that people will start getting books?
Probably October, November.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Just in time for Christmas.
and that's giving myself some room. Could be
Excellent.
sooner.
Um, all right. Well, JP, I know that you are quite a busy guy, so I don't
Mm.
want to keep you too long. Any last words of wisdom? Anything we should mention before you have to take off?
Yeah, if you want to, if you enjoy comic related content, make sure you check out The Gutter on Friday nights. We're always reviewing, we reviewed Vatican City issue 3 last week.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, I went on vacation, and the week I'm gone, we have Narwhal on, and I'm not even here for it.
Oh
Um,
man.
but yeah, we're doing weekly comic book content, and if you like, what do we call it? Silly food, comic, and gaming content, you can check out my channel. Um, and yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Show looks good, webcam looks good. Really appreciate you.
Thanks. Yeah, so everybody go check it out. Indiegogo, um, Eudaimonia number 3. And they can pick up issues 1 and 2 as well, right?
Yeah, there's a bundle. It's got, I think between all three books, it's got to be around like 150, 160 pages for $30.
Wow, that's a lot. All right, so yeah, everybody go check that out. Go check out The Gutter on Friday nights. It's a very fun show, especially if you're into comics, something to blow off some steam at the end of the week. And JP, hopefully we'll have you back on sooner than we did last time.
All right. I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
All right. Good night, everyone. Be back next